I am Clara Sterling, 32 years old, a pediatrician who has spent her entire life trying to heal others only to realize I could not heal the rot inside my own marriage. My husband abandoned my father's funeral to be with his mistress, but at 2 a.m. I received a message from my dad saying, "Clara, it is. Dad, come to the cemetery quietly right now." Before I tell you what I found in the family mausoleum, let me know in the comments if you have ever trusted someone who betrayed you when you were at your lowest point. Hit like and subscribe if you want to see karma served cold. The rain at the Sterling family cemetery in the outskirts of New York was relentless. It was not a soft cleansing drizzle, but a punishing downpour that turned the manicured earth into mud. I stood there under a large black umbrella, clutching the handle so tightly my knuckles turned white. My father, Thomas Sterling, the real estate tycoon who had built half the skyline of this city, was being lowered into the ground. The mahogany casket looked impossibly small for a man who had taken up so much space in the world and in my heart. Around me, a sea of black suits and designer sunglasses bowed their heads. They were business partners, rivals, and politicians, people who came to pay respects to the Sterling Empire rather than the man himself. I felt hollowed out. My eyes were dry because I had no tears left to cry. I looked to my right, expecting to feel the reassuring warmth of my husband Derek. I needed him to hold my hand. I needed him to be the rock he promised he would be when we exchanged vows 5 years ago. But Derek was not looking at the casket. He was looking at his wrist. The screen of his Apple Watch lit up in the gloom, casting a faint artificial glow on his impatient face. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, checking the time for the third time in 5 minutes. He let out a sigh that was too loud for the solemnity of the moment. Then he leaned in close to my ear. I expected a word of comfort. Instead, I smelled his expensive cologne mixed with the damp air as he whispered, "Clara, I have to go. The board called an emergency merger meeting regarding the acquisition. If I am not there, the stock price will tank. You can handle the reception yourself, right?" I turned to look at him. His eyes were void of any grief. They were calculating and cold. The priest had not even finished the final prayer. My father was not even fully in the ground. "Derek," I whispered back, my voice trembling. "It is my father. It is the funeral. You cannot leave now." Derek adjusted his silk tie, looking annoyed rather than apologetic. He touched my shoulder, but there was no warmth in the gesture. It felt patronizing, like a master patting a pet. "Be reasonable, Clara. Your dad would have wanted me to protect the business. That is what I'm doing. I will see you at home." Before I could protest, he turned on his heel and walked away. I watched his tall, broad figure retreating through the rows of gray tombstones. He did not walk with the heavy step of a grieving son-in-law. He walked with a bounce in his step, a sense of liberation. Something in my chest tightened. A dark instinct I had ignored for months suddenly flared up. The merger meeting. Derek had mentioned it over breakfast, but he said it was scheduled for next week. Why would they hold a merger meeting on the day of the founder's funeral? I should have stayed. I should have thrown a handful of dirt onto the casket and accepted the condolences of the line of strangers waiting behind me. But my feet moved on their own. I handed my umbrella to my aunt and muttered an excuse about needing a moment of air. I followed Derek. I kept my distance, weaving through the marble angels and obelisks until I reached the edge of the parking lot. Derek did not head toward his black Mercedes sedan. Instead, he walked briskly toward the VIP section where a bright cherry-red Porsche 911 was idling. The engine purred aggressively, cutting through the sound of the rain. I froze behind an oak tree. I knew that car. I had seen it parked in the driveway of my father's estate every day for the past 6 months. It belonged to Jessica, the 24-year-old private nurse we had hired to care for my father during his final battle with illness. Jessica with her bright blonde hair and uniforms that were always a size too tight. Jessica, who had held my father, his hand and fed him his soup. Why was my husband getting into the nurse's car? I watched as Derek opened the passenger door. He did not just get in. He leaned over the center console. Through the rain-slicked windshield, I saw him grab the woman in the driver's seat and kiss her. It was not a friendly peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss that lasted for several seconds. Then he laughed, I saw his head thrown back in laughter as he slammed the door shut. The red Porsche peeled out of the cemetery, spraying mud onto the pristine white gates as it sped toward the highway. My world tilted on its axis. The grief that had been paralyzing me was instantly replaced by a cold, sharp shock. I thought about the last 5 years. I thought about who I was. I was Clara Sterling. I had graduated top of my class from medical school. I had a residency offer at Johns Hopkins, one of the most prestigious programs in the country. But I turned it down. I turned it down because Derek wanted to stay in New York for his finance career. I settled for a quiet private practice so I could be the supportive wife. I let him manage my inheritance. I let him convince me that I was too emotional to understand the complexities of the stock market and real estate trusts. "You saved the children." "Clara let me save the money," he would say, with that charming smile. I believed him. I believed he was the strong protector carrying the burden for me. Now I stood in the rain realizing I had been the perfect fool. But a doctor's instinct is to investigate, to find the source of the bleeding. I ran to my car, a sensible Volvo that Derek insisted was safer for me. My hands were shaking so hard, I dropped the keys twice before I could start the ignition. I drove out of the cemetery, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew where they were going. There was only one place Derek went when he wanted to celebrate a win. Le Jardin, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. It was 40 minutes away. I drove like a madwoman. I ran 2 red lights. My mind was racing faster than the engine. Why Jessica? Was it just a fling? A moment of weakness while I was distracted by my father's dying days. But the Porsche. That car cost over $100,000. How could a private nurse afford a brand new Porsche? The pieces of the puzzle were floating in my mind, but I was too terrified to put them together. I pulled up to Le Jardin. The valet looked at my muddy car and my disheveled appearance with disdain, but he recognized the Sterling name on my credit card. I did not wait for a ticket. I stormed past him into the restaurant. It was mid-afternoon and the place was quiet, filled only with the soft clinking of silverware and low murmurs. I scanned the room, and there they were. They were seated at the best table by the window, overlooking the rain-swept garden. They were not having a meeting. They were having a feast. A bottle of Dom Perignon sat in an ice bucket between them. A tower of seafood was on the table. Jessica had changed out of her funeral black into a slinky red dress that matched her car. Derek had taken off his jacket and loosened his tie. He looked relaxed. He looked triumphant. I wanted to march over there and flip the table. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. But something stopped me. A survival mechanism kicked in. If I confronted them now, they would lie. Derek would gaslight me. He would say I was crazy with grief, that he was just comforting a family employee. I needed ammunition. I needed the truth. I spotted a booth directly behind them, separated by a tall velvet partition and a large potted fern. I signaled the hostess and slipped a $100 bill into her hand, pressing a finger to my lips. She nodded and led me to the booth. I slid into the seat, pressing my back against the velvet that separated me from my husband and his mistress. I was so close I could smell the truffle oil from their food. I held my breath and listened. "I cannot believe you actually left in the middle of the prayer." Jessica's voice was high and giggly. She sounded nothing like the professional somber nurse who had administered morphine to my father. "You are so bad, Derek." Derek laughed, the sound vibrating through the seat back. I could not stand another minute of that depressing chanting. "Besides, the old man is finally dead. The hard part is over, babe." "We did it." My blood ran cold. "The hard part is over." What did that mean? I heard the pop of a champagne cork. "Here is to freedom," Derek said. "And here is to the $50 million in the trust fund that unlocks tomorrow morning." "But what about Clara?" Jessica asked, her voice dropping slightly but still audible. "Is she going to be a problem? The lawyer said she has to sign off on the executive control transfer." Derek scoffed. I heard the clink of glass as he took a sip. "Clara, please. She is a mess. She is weak, Jessica. She has always been weak. That is why I married her. She thinks she is this brilliant doctor, but when it comes to life, she is a child. I have been gaslighting her about her finances for years. She thinks the company is in debt. She thinks she needs me to save the estate. Tomorrow after the will reading, I will have her sign the power of attorney. I will tell her it is just legal formalities to pay off her dad's medical bills. Once she signs, I will kick her out of the manor so fast her head will spin. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stop a sob from escaping. Tears streamed down my face, but they were hot, angry tears. He had never loved me. It was all a long con, a 5-year strategy to get his hands on the sterling fortune. And then Jessica said something that made my heart stop beating altogether. "I am just glad we do not have to deal with the old man anymore," she said. He was getting suspicious toward the end. "Do you think he knew?" "About the medicine." Derek's voice dropped lower, sinister and confident. He did not know anything. He was too out of it. Swapping his heart medication for sugar pills was genius but slow. Adding the extra dose of sedative to his tea last week was the masterstroke. It looked exactly like heart failure. Even the coroner bought it. No autopsy, no questions, just a clean, natural death. I sat there frozen. The world dissolved around me. They did not just let him die. They killed him. My husband and the nurse had murdered my father. The waiter approached my table asking if I wanted water. I waved him away, violently terrified that I would vomit right there on the white tablecloth. My hands were trembling uncontrollably, but my mind was suddenly crystal clear. The grief was gone. The sadness was gone. In its place was a cold, terrifying rage that I had never felt before. I was not Clara, the weak wife, anymore. I was the daughter of Thomas Sterling, and I was sitting 2 feet away from his murderers. I carefully pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the voice recorder app. My thumb hovered over the red button. I needed them to say it again. I needed proof. I waited, listening to the sound of their laughter, the sound of them celebrating my destruction. "Baby, you're going to look so good as the lady of the manor," Derek said. "I'm going to renovate the whole place, burn all of Clara's stupid books and that ugly art collection her dad loved. It is our time now." I recorded every word. I sat there for another 10 minutes, absorbing the poison of their betrayal until I had enough. Then I slipped out of the booth. I did not confront them. Not yet. Confronting them now would be a mercy they did not deserve. I needed to destroy them. I needed to take everything from them just as they had taken everything from me. I walked out of the restaurant into the rain. I got into my car and drove back to the empty mansion that felt like a tomb. I sat in my father's study, surrounded by his books and the smell of his tobacco pipe. I waited. I waited for Derek to come home and pretend to be the grieving husband. I waited for the night to fall. And then at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. The screen lit up in the darkness. The caller ID made me scream. It read, "Daddy." I stared at it, terrified. My father was dead. I had seen him in the casket. I had seen the dirt cover him. But the text message was there, glowing in the dark. "Clara, it is Dad. Come to the cemetery, quietly, right now." I grabbed my keys and a surgical scalpel from my medical bag. I did not know if I was walking into a trap or a miracle. But I knew one thing. The Clara who cried at the funeral was gone. The woman driving back into the darkness was someone else entirely, and she was ready for war. The silence in Sterling Manor was heavy enough to crush a person. I sat in my father's leather armchair, the high back towering over me, making me feel like a child again. The room was dark, illuminated only by the dying embers of the fireplace, and the pale moonlight filtering through the heavy velvet curtains. This study had always been my sanctuary. It smelled of old paper mahogany and the cherry tobacco my father used to smoke in his pipe. But tonight, that scent was a cruel reminder of what I had lost. The house was massive, a sprawling estate that had been in my family for 3 generations, but without my father, it felt like a mausoleum. Every shadow looked like a ghost. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a whisper. I had been sitting there for hours, staring at the grandfather clock in the corner. Its rhythmic ticking was the only sound in the world. Tick-tock, tick-tock, counting down the seconds of my misery. I had not changed out of my funeral dress. The black silk felt like a second skin constricting my chest, making it hard to breathe. My eyes were dry and burning. I had cried all my tears in the car on the way back from the restaurant. Now there was only a vast, empty desert inside me where my heart used to be. I looked at the heavy iron safe built into the wall behind the desk. It was hidden behind a portrait of my great-grandfather, but I knew it was there. Derek knew it was there too. That safe contained the deeds to the properties, the original stock certificates, and the family jewels. It was the heart of the Sterling Empire, and tonight I knew the vulture would come for it. The clock chimed once, 1 in the morning. Suddenly the silence was shattered by the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway. The headlights of Derek's Mercedes swept across the window like searchlights hunting for a fugitive. I did not move. I gripped the armrests of the chair, my fingers digging into the worn leather. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, not with love, but with a primal fear mixed with adrenaline. The front door opened with a heavy thud. I heard his keys jingle as he tossed them onto the antique console table in the foyer. "Clara." His voice echoed through the empty hallway. It was loud, too loud for a house in mourning. "Clara, where are you?" I did not answer. I listened to his heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. He stumbled slightly. He was drunk. The man who had abandoned my father's funeral to drink champagne with his mistress was now coming home to play the role of the grieving husband. The door to the study creaked open. The hallway light spilled in, blinding me for a moment. Derek stood in the doorway, his silhouette looming large and menacing. He had taken off his tie and his top button was undone. His hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was messy. He squinted into the darkness, trying to locate me. "There you are," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "Why are you sitting in the dark? It is creepy." He walked over to the desk and switched on the green banker's lamp. The sudden light made me flinch. He leaned down to kiss me on the forehead. I had to use every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. As he leaned in, the smell hit me. It was a nauseating cocktail of expensive Scotch-stale cigarettes and that cloying floral perfume. Chanel No. 5. Jessica is scent. It was so strong it made my stomach turn. It was clinging to his shirt, clinging to his skin, like a mark of ownership. "I am sorry I'm late, babe," he said, straightening up and loosening his cufflinks. "The merger meeting was brutal. The board is in a panic. They are worried about the stock plummeting now that Thomas is gone. I had to calm them down. I had to be the rock. For us." The lie slid out of his mouth so easily. It was practiced smooth and utterly devoid of shame. He looked at me with those blue eyes that I once thought held the stars, but now I saw them for what they were. 2 cold pieces of glass. I looked up at him, keeping my face blank. My voice was a hoarse whisper. "You smell like alcohol, Derek." He didn't even blink. He let out a weary sigh, rubbing his temples. "I had a few drinks with the partners after the meeting. We had to toast to your dad's legacy." It was respectful, Clara. It was a wake for the business. You would not understand the corporate culture. He walked around the desk, pacing nervously. He was vibrating with energy. It was not grief. It was the manic energy of a gambler who thinks he has just won the jackpot. He ran his hand along the edge of the desk, his fingers tracing the wood possessively. "Look, I know you are tired," he said, his tone shifting, becoming more businesslike. "But we need to handle some logistics. The lawyers are coming tomorrow for the reading of the will. We need to be prepared for what I asked." My hands were trembling in my lap, but I hid them under the desk. "Prepared for the inventory," he said sharply. He stopped pacing and turned to face me. "We need to know exactly what is in the safe, Clara. Your dad was senile toward the end. Who knows what he moved around or what he gave away? We need to secure the assets before the lawyers get involved and complicate things." He held out his hand, palm up. "Give me the key, Clara." I stared at his hand. It was the hand that had held mine at the altar. It was the hand that had caressed Jessica's thigh in the restaurant just hours ago. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, fragile but distinct. Derek blinked as if he had misheard me. "Excuse me." I said no. I repeated my voice, gaining a tiny fraction of strength. "It is 1 in the morning, Derek. I am exhausted. My father was buried today. I am not opening the safe tonight. We can do it tomorrow with the lawyers present. That is the proper protocol." Derek's face darkened. The mask of the concerned husband slipped, revealing something ugly underneath. He took a step closer to the chair, invading my personal space. "Do not talk to me about protocol, Clara," he snapped. "I am trying to save your inheritance. You are too emotional to think straight. You are acting just like your mother used to, hysterical and irrational. I am the head of this household now. I am the one who understands how to manage this wealth. You are just a pediatrician. You put Band-Aids on scraped knees. You do not know how to protect a multi-million-dollar estate." He leaned down, his hands slamming onto the desk, making the lamp rattle. "Give me the key." His breath washed over my face, hot and reeking of betrayal. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time I did not see my husband. I saw a stranger, a dangerous, desperate stranger. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I locked my knees. I looked him in the eye. "The safe belongs to Thomas Sterling," I said, "and until the will is read, nobody touches it. Not even you." For a second there was silence. Then his hand moved. It was a blur of motion too fast for me to react. Crack! The sound was like a whip being cracked in the small room. My head snapped to the side. A sharp, stinging pain exploded on my left cheek, radiating into my jaw and ear. I stumbled back, catching myself against the bookshelf. The taste of copper filled my mouth. He had hit me. Derek had slapped me. I stood there frozen, my hand cupping my burning cheek, staring at him in shock. In 5 years of marriage he had manipulated me, gaslit me, and lied to me, but he had never raised a hand to me. This was a line I thought he would never cross. Derek stood there breathing heavily, his hand still raised slightly as if he was surprised by his own violence. But there was no regret in his eyes. There was only rage, cold, calculating rage. He stepped closer, pointing a finger in my face. "Do not ever defy me again, Clara," he hissed. His voice was low, a guttural growl that sent shivers of ice down my spine. "You think you are smart. You think you have power because you are a Sterling. But you are nothing without me. You are a weak, pathetic little girl who needs a daddy to tell her what to do. Well, Daddy is dead. I am in charge now." He loomed over me, his shadow swallowing me whole. "I'm going to take a shower," he said, straightening his shirt as if nothing had happened. "When I come out, I expect that key to be on the nightstand. Do not make me ask twice, and do not make me use force again, because next time, Clara, I will not be so gentle." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door wide open. I heard his footsteps retreating down the hall, heavy and rhythmic. I slid down the bookshelf until I hit the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest and buried my face in my hands. My cheek was throbbing, pulsating with heat. But the pain in my heart was worse. The illusion was completely shattered. I was alone in a big, cold house with a monster. He was not just a cheater, he was a predator, and I was the prey. I sat there in the dark, listening to the water running in the master bathroom upstairs. He was washing off the scent of his mistress, washing off the guilt, so he could sleep in my bed. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I almost retched. I looked at the desk where the photo of my father sat in a silver frame. He was smiling that warm, reassuring smile that used to make me feel safe. "Help me, Daddy," I whispered into the darkness, my voice breaking. "Please tell me what to do. I am scared." The grandfather clock ticked on, indifferent to my terror. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to lengthen, reaching out for me. I was trapped. If I tried to leave now, he would hear the car. If I stayed, I might not survive the night. I closed my eyes, praying for a miracle, praying for a sign. And that was when the phone on the desk buzzed. I lay curled in the fetal position on the far edge of the king-sized bed, trying to make myself as small as possible. The master bedroom, which I had once decorated with such joy, now felt like a cold, sterile cage. The heavy silk duvet felt like a shroud. Beside me, I could hear the rhythmic, deep breathing of my husband. Derek was asleep. He had come out of the shower smelling of mint and arrogance, and had fallen into a deep slumber within minutes, as if he had not just assaulted his wife and celebrated the death of her father. His ability to sleep so soundly while my world was collapsing was the final proof of his sociopathy. I stared into the darkness, my eyes swollen and gritty. My left cheek still throbbed a dull, persistent ache where his hand had connected with my face. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the scene in the restaurant. I saw his head thrown back in laughter. I saw Jessica, his hand on his arm. I saw the look of pure hatred in his eyes when he demanded the key. I was trapped in a nightmare loop, and I did not know how to wake up. The digital clock on the nightstand cast a faint red glow across the room. It was 1:59 a.m. I watched the numbers change. 2 a.m., the witching hour, the time when the world is at its darkest and the monsters come out to play. I felt a wave of crushing loneliness. Usually when I was this sad, I would call my father. No matter what time it was, he would answer. He would tell me to breathe. He would tell me a bad joke to make me smile. But now he was gone. He was 6 feet under the wet earth at the cemetery, and I was entirely alone. Suddenly the silence was shattered. Bzzt, bzzt. My phone, which I had left on the nightstand, began to vibrate against the mahogany wood. The sound was jarring in the quiet room, sounding like an angry hornet. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who would be calling me at 2 a.m. on the day of my father's funeral? I reached out with a trembling hand, desperate to silence it, before it woke Derek. If he woke up and saw me awake, if he saw me checking my phone, he might get angry again. He might finish what he started in the study. I grabbed the cold metal device and pulled it under the covers, creating a small tent of darkness. I pressed the side button to illuminate the screen. The light was blinding for a second, forcing me to squint. When my eyes adjusted and focused on the caller ID, my breath hitched in my throat. I stopped breathing. My heart stopped beating. The name on the screen was Daddy. I stared at it, my mind unable to process the visual information. It was impossible. It was a hallucination. I was so grief-stricken that my brain was projecting what I wanted to see. I blinked hard, squeezing my eyes shut, and then opened them again. The name remained. Daddy. And below it, the notification of a new text message. I felt a surge of ice water flow through my veins. My father's phone was in the police evidence locker. Or was it? Had Derek taken it? Was this some kind of sick, twisted game? With fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else, I swiped across the screen to open the message. The little bubble popped up. Clara, it is Dad. Come to the cemetery quietly. Right now. I dropped the phone. It landed softly on the mattress, but to me, it felt like I had dropped a live grenade. I scrambled backward until my back hit the headboard, pulling my knees to my chest. I stared at the device glowing innocently on the sheets. This cannot be real. I am a doctor. I deal in science. I deal in facts. And the fact was that Thomas Sterling was dead. I was there in the hospital room. I watched the heart monitor flatline. I heard the long, singular tone that signals the end of a life. I checked his pupils myself. They were fixed and dilated. I felt his skin turn cold. I signed the preliminary death certificate. There was no ambiguity. There was no doubt. My father was biologically, clinically, and legally dead. So who sent that message? My mind began to race, spiraling into a vortex of paranoia and terror. Theory 1. It is a cruel prank. Someone hacked his cloud account. Maybe a journalist trying to get a scoop. Maybe a business rival trying to torment the family. But who would be that cruel? Who would know his personal number and my personal number and the intimate way he used to text me? Theory 2. It is Jessica. She has his phone. She stole it from the house before he died. She is texting me to taunt me, to lure me out so she can laugh at me standing in the rain. Theory 3. And this was the one that made my blood run cold. It is Derek. I looked over at his sleeping form. Was he really asleep? Or was he faking it? Was this a test? Was he waiting for me to leave the house so he could call the police and say his grief-stricken wife had lost her mind? If I went to the cemetery in the middle of the night digging at a grave, he could have me committed. He could declare me mentally incompetent. That would give him full power of attorney over everything. The business, the estate, me. It was the perfect trap. The gaslighting had escalated. He wanted me to question my own sanity. He wanted me to chase ghosts so he could lock me away. But then I looked at the phone again. I picked it up and read the message one more time. Clara, it is Dad. Come to the cemetery quietly. Right now. There was something about the syntax, the punctuation. My father was a stickler for grammar, even in text messages. He always used capitalization. He always used periods. Derek texted in lowercase fragments. Jessica used emojis. This message looked like him. It sounded like him. A tiny, irrational spark of hope ignited in my chest. What if? What if I was wrong? What if the machines were wrong? I had heard stories of misdiagnosis, of catalepsy, of people waking up in the morgue. But he had been embalmed, hadn't he? No, we requested a closed casket. We requested no embalming for religious reasons my father had suddenly adopted in his final weeks. I hadn't seen the body since the hospital. My thoughts were frantic, colliding with each other. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. If I stayed here in this bed, I was safe, but I was a prisoner. I was a victim waiting for the next blow. If I went out there into the night, I might be walking into a trap. I might be walking into my own death. But what if he is alive? The thought was so powerful it drowned out the fear. What if my father was out there trapped in that stone mausoleum, waking up in the dark, terrified and calling for his little girl? The thought of him suffocating alone in that box made me nauseous. I looked at Derek one last time. He shifted in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. His hand twitched, the hand that had hit me. I realized then that I had no choice. Even if it was a trap, I had to go. Because staying here with Derek was a death sentence anyway. My soul was already dying in this house. If I went to the cemetery and found nothing, at least I would know. At least I would know the depth of their cruelty. And if I found something... I slid out of bed, moving with the stealth of a cat. My bare feet made no sound on the plush carpet. I did not change out of my silk pajamas. I just grabbed a long trench coat from the closet and pulled it over me. I shoved my feet into a pair of rain boots. I grabbed my car keys. And then I paused. If this was a trap, I needed to be ready. I walked to my medical bag, which was sitting on the vanity. I opened it, and the instruments glinted under the moonlight. My hand hovered over the stethoscope. Then it moved to the surgical kit. I pulled out a scalpel. It was a number 10 blade, small, sharp, and deadly. I capped it and slid it into the deep pocket of my trench coat. I was not going as a doctor tonight. I was going as a woman who had been pushed too far. I tiptoed out of the bedroom, closing the door silently behind me. The house was a cavern of shadows. I moved down the stairs, avoiding the creaky step on the third riser that I had known since childhood. I slipped out the side door into the storm. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with mist. The wind howled through the trees like a morning chorus. I got into my Volvo and started the engine, praying the noise wouldn't wake him. I left the headlights off until I rolled down the driveway and turned onto the main road. As I drove toward the cemetery, the message burned in my mind. Right now. Right now. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I was terrified. I was trembling. But for the first time in months, I felt alive. I was driving toward the unknown, toward the ghosts of my past. I did not know what I would find in the graveyard. A miracle, a monster, or just the empty silence of the dead. But I was coming, Daddy. I was coming. The drive to the cemetery was a blur of shadows and fog. The winding roads of the Hamptons were usually scenic and peaceful, but tonight they felt like the throat of a beast swallowing me whole. My headlights cut through the thick mist that had rolled in from the ocean, turning the world into a gray void. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. Every tree that flashed by looked like a reaching hand. Every shadow looked like a lurking figure. I pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the Oakwood Memorial Park. Usually these gates were locked tight at sundown, guarded by a security system that my father had paid for himself. But tonight, as I approached, I saw that the heavy iron was slightly ajar, just enough for a car to slip through. Panic flared in my chest. Was this the trap? Had Derek unlocked it waiting for me? Or had my father somehow done it? I killed the headlights. I could not risk being seen. I slowly maneuvered my Volvo through the gap, the tires crunching softly on the gravel path. I drove for another 100 yards before pulling off the road and parking behind a large weeping willow tree. Its long branches draped over the car like a shroud, hiding me from view. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. The engine ticked as it cooled. The wind whispered through the leaves. I looked at the dashboard clock, 2:20 in the morning. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of damp earth and pine. Then I reached into my bag and wrapped my fingers around the scalpel. The cold surgical steel felt grounding against my palm. It was a tool of healing, but tonight it was a weapon. I removed the safety cap. The blade gleamed in the faint moonlight, sharp enough to slice through skin and muscle with zero resistance. If Derek was out here waiting to ambush me, I would not go down without a fight. I was done being the victim. I opened the car door and stepped out into the night. The air was freezing damp and heavy, clinging to my skin. I pulled my trench coat tighter around my silk pajamas and buttoned it all the way to my chin. My rain boots sank slightly into the wet grass as I left the gravel path. The Sterling family mausoleum was located at the very top of the hill, the highest point in the cemetery. It was a symbol of my father's ego and his love for his ancestors. He wanted the Sterlings to look down on the town even in death. To get there, I had to walk through the oldest section of the graveyard, where the headstones were weathered and cracked, leaning at odd angles like crooked teeth. I began to climb. The fog was thicker here, swirling around my ankles like dry ice. It distorted everything. Statues of angels looked like weeping women. Obelisks looked like watching sentinels. I kept my head down, focusing on my footing, clutching the scalpel in my pocket. My heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drum of war in the silence. Thump, 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 thump. Every snap of a twig made me freeze. Every rustle of a bush made me whirl around, blade ready. But there was nothing. Just the endless rows of the dead sleeping in their cold beds. As I neared the top of the hill, the silhouette of the mausoleum emerged from the mist. It was a massive structure built of gray granite, with 4 Doric columns supporting a triangular pediment. The name Sterling was carved deep into the stone above the bronze double doors. It looked impenetrable, a fortress for the afterlife. I stopped about 50 feet away, hiding behind the statue of a winged cherub. I scanned the area. There were no other cars, no sign of Derek is Mercedes or Jessica is Porsche. The area seemed deserted. But then I saw it, a faint flicker of light. It was coming from inside the mausoleum. I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The heavy bronze doors, which had been sealed shut this afternoon, were cracked open just an inch. Through that narrow gap, a beam of artificial light was spilling out, cutting a yellow slice into the fog. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was inside. Was it grave robbers? Was it Derek checking to make sure the old man was really gone? Or was it something else entirely? I moved forward. I did not run. I moved with the calculated stealth of a predator stalking its prey. I stayed low, moving from headstone to headstone, keeping to the shadows. The wet grass silenced my footsteps. I reached the bottom of the marble steps leading up to the mausoleum entrance. I paused, listening. I heard a sound. It was not a voice. It was a rhythmic hissing noise. Hiss, click, hiss, click. It sounded mechanical. It sounded like medical equipment. I crept up the stairs, my hand sweating around the handle of the scalpel. I reached the bronze door. The metal was ice cold under my fingertips. I took a breath, held it, and then gently pushed. The door swung inward on silent, well-oiled hinges. I stepped into the threshold, ready to slash, ready to scream, ready to die if I had to. The interior of the mausoleum was vast, lined with floor-to-ceiling marble. The air inside was colder than the air outside, smelling of stale flowers and stone. In the center of the room, on a raised dais, sat the mahogany casket that we had lowered into the ground just 12 hours ago. But the casket was not closed, and it was not in the ground. Sitting on top of the closed lid of the coffin was a man. He was wearing a dark suit that was rumpled and loose on his frame. His skin was pale, almost translucent under the harsh light of a portable camping lantern that sat on the floor. He held a clear plastic mask to his face, connected by a long tube to a green oxygen tank standing beside the coffin. Hiss. Click. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with effort. Then he lowered the mask and looked up at me. His eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark circles, but the spark in them was unmistakable. It was the same spark I had seen every day of my childhood, the same fierce intelligence that had built an empire. Clara, he rasped, his voice rough and weak. You came. I dropped the scalpel. It clattered loudly on the marble floor, echoing through the tomb. My knees gave out. I collapsed onto the cold stone floor, staring up at him. My brain could not process the image. It was impossible. It was a miracle. It was a nightmare. "Daddy," I whispered. Thomas Sterling smiled. It was a weak, tired smile, but it was real. He was not a ghost. He was solid. He was breathing. He was alive. Standing in the shadows behind him, a second figure stepped forward into the light. It was Dr. Harrison. My father's oldest friend and personal physician. He was wearing a dark raincoat and holding a syringe. He looked at me with a grave expression. "I am sorry for the deception, Clara," Dr. Harrison said, his voice low and apologetic. But it was the only way. I looked from Dr. Harrison back to my father who was supposed to be dead. My father who was currently sitting on his own coffin looking like a king who had just returned from hell. "Daddy," I stammered, tears flooding my eyes, blurring my vision. "How? Why?" I saw the monitor flatline. "I felt your skin. You were cold." My father took another breath from the oxygen mask, then set it down on his lap. He beckoned me closer. "Come here, Clara," he said. I scrambled to my feet and ran to him. I threw my arms around him, burying my face in his chest. He smelled of antiseptic and death, but underneath that, he smelled like my dad. He felt frail, thin, and bony, but his heart was beating against my ear. Thump, 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 stronger than mine. He stroked my hair, his hand trembling slightly. "I am so sorry, baby girl," he whispered. "I know I scared you. I know this is cruel." But I had no choice. They were killing me, Clara. I pulled back, wiping my eyes, my hands gripping his shoulders to make sure he wouldn't vanish. Who was killing you?" He looked me dead in the eye, and his expression hardened. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold steel that I had only ever seen him use in boardrooms. "Derek," he said, spitting the name out like a curse. "And that nurse, Jessica." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. Hearing it from his lips made it real in a way that my suspicions never could. "I found the camera," my father continued, his voice gaining strength, fueled by anger. "I hid a camera in the study months ago because I thought the cleaning staff was stealing silver. Instead, I caught my son-in-law and my nurse mixing powders into my tea. I caught them laughing about how long it was taking me to die. I caught them planning how they would spend my money once I was in the ground." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black flash drive. He held it up, the plastic glinting in the lantern light. "It is all here, Clara. Every dose of poison, every conversation, every kiss." I stared at the drive. "The evidence of my husband is treachery. Then why fake your death?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why not just go to the police? Why put me through this?" "Because the police are slow," my father said, "and Derek is slippery. If I had confronted him, he would have destroyed the evidence. He would have claimed it was assisted suicide. He would have manipulated you. He has been manipulating you for years. Clara and I let it happen because I thought he made you happy. But when I saw him poisoning me, I knew I had to protect you. And the only way to protect you was to let him think he had won." Dr. Harrison stepped forward, checking my father's pulse. "We used a synthetic neurotoxin derived from pufferfish venom," he explained, his tone clinical. "It mimics death perfectly. It slows the heart rate to 2 beats per minute. It lowers the body temperature. To any doctor without a toxicology screen, it looks exactly like cardiac arrest. I signed the death certificate. I handled the body. We brought him here to the mausoleum right after the service before the groundskeeper sealed the tomb. My head was spinning. The complexity of the plan was staggering. "So you have been here all night?" I asked, looking around the cold stone room. "Yes," my father said, "waiting for the pills to wear off, and waiting for you." He reached out and took my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "I needed you to see the truth, Clara. I needed you to see Derek for who he really is. Did he go to the funeral reception?" I shook my head, the anger rising in my throat again. "No. He left. He left right in the middle of the prayer. He went to Le Jardin with Jessica. They celebrated." My father nodded grimly. "Just as I predicted. He thinks he is untouchable. He thinks the king is dead and the castle is his." He squeezed my hand. "Tomorrow is the reading of the will," he said. Derek expects to walk away with everything. He expects you to sign over your rights. He expects to kick you out of the house. I remembered Derek's words in the study. Daddy is dead. I am in charge now. He hit me, Daddy, I whispered the confession slipping out before I could stop it. I touched my cheek. He hit me tonight because I would not give him the key to the safe. My father's eyes went wide, then they narrowed into slits of pure fury. The air in the mausoleum seemed to drop 10 degrees. He touched you, he growled. Yes. My father took a deep breath from the oxygen mask, his chest heaving. When he lowered it, he looked terrifying. He did not look like a sick old man anymore. He looked like a general preparing for a massacre. Then he has sealed his fate, my father said. He looked at Dr. Harrison. Help me up, Arthur. We have work to do. Dr. Harrison moved to support him, but my father waved him off. He stood up on his own, shaky but determined. He stood next to his own coffin, a living testament to vengeance. Clara, he said, looking down at me, wipe your tears. Put that scalpel back in your pocket. You are not going to need it to cut him. We are going to use something much sharper. We are going to use the law. We are going to use the truth. And we are going to use his own greed against him. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. Go home, he commanded. Go back to that house. Sleep in that bed next to that monster. Pretend you know nothing. Be the weak, grieving widow he thinks you are. Let him believe he has won. Let him bring his mistress into my home. Let him stand in front of the world and claim his victory. And then my father smiled a smile that was dark and full of promise. And then tomorrow, when he feels the safest, when he is standing on top of the world, we are going to pull the ground out from under him. We are going to bury him, Clara, just like he tried to bury me. I looked at my father, and for the first time in hours, the fear vanished. In its place, a cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. I picked up the scalpel from the floor and capped it. I slid it back into my pocket. Okay, Daddy, I said. I will do it. I turned to leave the mausoleum but stopped at the door. I looked back at the two men standing in the gloom of the crypt. I will see you tomorrow, I said. My father nodded. At the reading. Do not be late. I walked out of the mausoleum and back into the fog. The walk back to the car felt different. The shadows didn't scare me anymore. The wind didn't chill me. I wasn't Clara the victim anymore. I was a soldier on a mission, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I was going to go home and lie to my husband. I was going to act like the perfect fool, and I was going to enjoy every second of it because I knew something he didn't. I knew the dead were coming for him. The lantern light cast long dancing shadows against the marble walls of the mausoleum, creating a surreal theater for the most shocking conversation of my life. I sat on the edge of the stone dais, my hand gripping my father's hand, as if letting go would cause him to vanish back into the void. Dr. Harrison stood quietly in the corner, a silent sentinel guarding the door. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and the faint metallic scent of the oxygen tank, but to me it smelled like a second chance. I looked at my father. He looked older than I remembered. His skin was pale and paper-thin, and there were bruises on his arms from IV lines, but his eyes were burning with a clarity that had been missing for months. For the last half-year I had watched him fade away. I had watched him become confused, lethargic, and weak. I had diagnosed it as rapid-onset dementia combined with heart failure. I had written the prescriptions myself. I had comforted him as he forgot names and dates. But now, sitting here in his own tomb, he looked sharp. He looked dangerous. Dad, I said, my voice trembling, you need to explain this to me properly. You said they were poisoning you, but I am a doctor. I saw your charts. Your heart was failing. Your kidneys were shutting down. I checked your blood work. My father let out a dry, humorless laugh. He reached for a bottle of water Dr. Harrison had left for him and took a small sip. You saw what they wanted you to see, Clara. He said, his voice raspy but steady. You saw the symptoms of a body shutting down, but you were looking for natural causes because you are a good person. You do not look at your husband and see a murderer. You do not look at your father as nurse and see an assassin. He leaned forward, his grip on my hand tightening. It was thallium, Clara. I gasped. Thallium. The poisoner is poison. It is odorless, tasteless, and dissolves instantly in liquid. It is a heavy metal that attacks the nervous system, the heart, and the kidneys. Thallium-1 whispered the medical implications racing through my mind. That explains the hair loss, the numbness in your fingertips, the confusion. I thought it was poor circulation. I thought it was age. Exactly, my father said, and that is exactly what they counted on. Small doses, just enough to make me sick, just enough to make me weak so I would sign over power of attorney, but not enough to kill me immediately. They wanted a long, slow decline so no one would ask questions when I finally stopped breathing. He looked over at Dr. Harrison. "Tell her, Arthur. Tell her what you found." Dr. Harrison stepped forward into the light. He looked tired, his face etched with the stress of the secret he had been keeping. 2 months ago, your father came to me in secret, Clara. He came to my private clinic, not the hospital. He said he felt like he was being drugged. He brought me samples of his daily protein shakes, the ones Jessica prepared for him every morning. I ran a toxicology screen in my private lab. The levels of thallium were lethal. If he had continued drinking them for another week, his heart would have exploded. I felt a wave of nausea. Jessica, the bubbly nurse who smiled at me every morning, the woman I had thanked for taking such good care of him. She had been feeding him death with a spoon. But why, I asked, tears streaming down my face. Why didn't you go to the police right then? We could have had them arrested. My father shook his head slowly. Because we had no proof of who was doing it, he said. If I had gone to the police, Derek would have thrown Jessica under the bus. He would have claimed he knew nothing about it. He would have played the victim, claiming his crazy mistress acted alone. Jessica would have gone to jail, but Derek would have walked free. He would have remained your husband. He would have remained the executor of my estate. And eventually, Clara, he would have done the same thing to you. The room fell silent. I realized the terrifying truth of his words. Derek was smart. He was a chameleon. He would have spun the story. I needed to catch him, my father continued. I needed to see his face when he thought no one was watching. So I stopped taking the shakes. I poured them down the sink when Jessica wasn't looking. I started taking an antidote Dr. Harrison gave me. My mind started to clear. And that is when I installed the cameras. He pointed to his head. I played the part of the senile old man. I drooled. I stared at walls. I pretended I couldn't speak, and because they thought I was a vegetable, they stopped whispering. They started talking openly in front of me. He closed his eyes as if recalling a painful memory. I watched them in my study, Clara. I watched them on the monitor. I saw Derek pull Jessica onto his lap in my chair. I heard him tell her that he couldn't wait to turn my company into a piggy bank for his gambling debts. I heard him say that he was going to sell the house the moment I was dead, but the worst part was what he said about you. I held my breath, bracing myself. He called you a useful idiot, my father said, his voice cracking with emotion. He said you were the perfect cover, a respected doctor with a spotless reputation. No one would suspect a man married to a saint like you. He said he was going to divorce you the day the inheritance check cleared and leave you with nothing but the debt he had secretly racked up in your name. I felt cold. Colder than the marble floor. My marriage was not just a lie. It was a crime scene. So I knew I had to die, my father said, opening his eyes. It was the only way to make him feel safe, the only way to make him sloppy. He looked at Dr. Harrison again. Arthur proposed the plan. It was risky, insane really. But I had nothing left to lose. Dr. Harrison nodded. We used a combination of beta blockers and a precise dose of tetrodotoxin derived from pufferfish. It is extremely dangerous. It paralyzes the diaphragm and slows the heart rate to almost nothing. It creates a state of suspended animation that mimics death perfectly for about 12 hours. I stared at the doctor in horror. You stopped his heart. You could have killed him for real. It was a calculated risk, Dr. Harrison said softly. But Thomas insisted. We staged the cardiac arrest when I was making a house call, so I would be the one to declare death. I signed the certificate. I blocked the autopsy citing religious objection, which as the family physician I have the authority to do. I handled the transfer to the funeral home myself. The mortician is an old friend. He owes me a favor. He kept the casket in a temperature-controlled room, not a freezer. He did not embalm the body. And the funeral, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. the service today, the burial. That was the hardest part, my father said, squeezing my hand. Listening to you cry, hearing your pain through the wood of the casket. I wanted to scream. I wanted to bang on the lid and tell you I was okay, but I had to wait. I had to wait until the stone slab sealed the entrance. I had to wait until Derek drove away. He reached up and touched my face, wiping away a tear. I am so sorry, Clara. I know how much this hurt you, but you had to believe it. If you had known the truth, your face would have given it away. Derek knows you too well. He would have seen the secret in your eyes. You had to grieve so he would believe he had won. I nodded slowly, understanding the twisted logic of it all. It was a play. A macabre play written by a desperate father to save his daughter. So he thinks you are dead, I said. He thinks he is safe. He thinks he is God. My father corrected me. He thinks he has pulled off the perfect crime. He is drunk on power right now, and that is exactly where we want him. He sat up straighter, the blanket falling from his shoulders, revealing his suit jacket. Tomorrow at the reading of the will, he is going to make his move. He is going to produce a forged will, or that power of attorney he tried to make you sign. He is going to try to take everything. He already has the power of attorney, I said quietly. I told him I wouldn't sign it, but he threatened me. But the will, the original will, leaves everything to me, right? Yes, my father said. But Derek is arrogant. He doesn't just want the money. He wants the humiliation. He wants to destroy the Sterling legacy. He wants to stand in front of the board and the lawyers and claim victory. He looked around the mausoleum. This tomb, this silence. It is just the intermission, Clara. The final act happens tomorrow. I looked at the oxygen tank, the lantern, the doctor, and my resurrected father. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The cruelty of Derek leaving the funeral, the joy on his face at the restaurant, the desperation in his voice when he demanded the key to the safe. It all made sense now. He was terrified that something would go wrong at the last minute. He came home tonight, I said, my voice hardening. He was drunk. He demanded the key to your private safe, the one behind the painting. My father's eyes flashed. Did you give it to him? No, I said. That is why he hit me. Good girl, my father said, fierce pride in his voice. That safe is empty, Clara. I moved everything out weeks ago. If he had opened it and found it empty, he would have panicked. He would have run. We need him to stay. We need him to walk into that lawyer's office tomorrow, thinking he is about to become a king. He took a deep breath. You need to go back now. You need to be there when he wakes up. You need to apologize for last night. Tell him you were hysterical. Tell him you will sign whatever he wants. Feed his ego. Make him feel invincible. Can you do that, Clara? My father asked. Can you look at the man who tried to kill me and pretend to love him for a few more hours? I thought about the scalpel in my pocket. I thought about the slap. I thought about the red Porsche. I don't need to pretend to love him, I said. I just need to pretend to be defeated. And I have felt defeated for a long time, Dad. I can do that. My father pulled me into a hug. His body was frail, but his spirit was made of iron. You are a Sterling, he whispered into my hair. We do not break. We wait, and then we strike. I pulled away and stood up. I smoothed down my trench coat. I looked at Dr. Harrison, who gave me a reassuring nod. Thank you, Arthur, I said. Thank you for saving him. Dr. Harrison smiled a sad, tired smile. He is too stubborn to die, Clara. Now go. The sun will be up in a few hours. I turned and walked toward the heavy bronze doors. I paused and looked back at my father one last time. He was sitting on his coffin, lit by the lantern, looking like a vengeful spirit waiting to be unleashed. Sleep well, Daddy, I said. He grinned a wolfish grin that chilled me to the bone. I will sleep when Derek is in handcuffs. Now go. I pushed open the door and stepped back out into the mist. The fog was still thick, but the world felt different now. The cemetery wasn't a place of death anymore. It was a staging ground. I walked down the hill past the weeping angels and the crumbling stones, my boots gripping the wet earth. I had a secret that burned inside me hotter than any anger I had ever felt. My father was alive, and tomorrow my husband was going to wish he was dead. I got back into my car, my hands steady on the wheel. I drove out of the gates, leaving the dead behind, and headed back to the land of the living to play my part in the final act of this tragedy. The tears that had been streaming down my face just moments ago stopped. It wasn't a gradual cessation. It was sudden, as if someone had turned off a faucet inside my soul. The grief that had been drowning me since the moment the heart monitor flatlined in the hospital room evaporated. In its place, a new emotion took root. It was cold, heavy, and sharp. It was hatred, pure, unadulterated hatred. I looked at my father sitting on his own coffin, his face pale, but his eyes burning with a fierce determination. I looked at Dr. Harrison, the man who had risked his medical license to save his friend. And then I thought about Derek. I thought about the way he had looked at me in the study, his hand raised to strike. I thought about the way he had laughed with Jessica in the restaurant, celebrating the death of the man sitting before me. "They didn't just want you dead, Daddy," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It was lower, steady, and void of the tremor that had plagued me for weeks. "They wanted to erase you. They wanted to turn your legacy into their playground. Derek called me a child. He said I was weak. He said I was nothing without him." My father reached out and took my hand again. His skin was cool, but his grip was iron. "He is wrong, Clara," my father said. "He mistakes kindness for weakness. It is a common error among narcissists. He thinks because you love with your whole heart that you have no spine. He is about to learn how dangerous a patient woman can be." I squeezed his hand back. The image of Derek's face when he hit me flashed in my mind. "I will not let them live in peace," I said. The words tasted like steel in my mouth. "I don't just want them arrested. I want them destroyed. I want Derek to feel the same hopelessness I felt when I thought I was alone in this world. I want him to lose everything, his reputation, his freedom, his arrogance. I want him to crawl." My father nodded, a grim satisfaction settling on his features. "That is my girl," he whispered. "But to do that, we have to be smart. We cannot act on emotion. We have to follow the plan to the letter." He gestured for Dr. Harrison to bring the map of the estate that was laid out on a small portable table in the corner. It looked like they had been planning a military operation in here. "We have 48 hours, my father said, pointing to the calendar marked with red ink. "The reading of the will is scheduled for Friday morning at 9 o'clock. That is the deadline. That is when the trap springs." "Why wait?" I asked. "We have the toxicology report. We have the video of them poisoning you." "Isn't that enough to send them to prison for life?" "It is enough for attempted murder, yes," my father explained. "But Derek is slippery. He has expensive lawyers. He could claim Jessica acted alone. He could claim he was manipulated. He could plead down to a lesser charge. And even if he goes to jail, he might still have a claim on your assets if we don't sever the legal ties completely." He looked me deep in the eyes. "We need him to commit fraud, Clara. We need him to commit grand larceny and embezzlement on a massive scale. We need undeniable proof that he intended to strip you of everything. And the only way to get that is to let him do it." I frowned, trying to understand the legal chess game my father was playing. "You want me to let him steal the company?" I asked. "I want you to sign the papers my father said." I recoiled slightly. "What?" "Derek will try to get you to sign over your executive powers," my father continued. "He will probably have a stack of documents ready for you tomorrow morning. Power of attorney, transfer of stock, access to the offshore accounts. He will tell you it is just administrative work. He will tell you it is to pay estate taxes. He will lie," I said, bitter bile rising in my throat. "Yes, he will lie," my father agreed. "And you are going to believe him. You are going to take the pen, Clara, and you are going to sign every single piece of paper he puts in front of you. You are going to sign away the house. You are going to sign away the company. You are going to give him the keys to the kingdom." "But then he wins," I protested. "If I sign those papers, he legally owns everything." My father smiled, a wolfish, dangerous smile. "No, he doesn't. Because a contract signed based on a fraudulent premise is void. But the act of having you sign it, the act of transferring the funds, that is the crime. Once he moves a single dollar from your account to his private account, he has committed federal wire fraud. Once he files those papers with the state, he has committed perjury. We are not just catching him for what he did to me. We are catching him for what he is trying to do to you. We are going to bury him under a mountain of felonies so high he will never see the sun again." I understood then. It wasn't just about justice. It was about total annihilation. It was about ensuring that when Derek fell, he fell into a hole so deep he could never climb out. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "I can do that. I can play the fool." I have been playing the fool for 5 years. Apparently, I just didn't know it. "There is one more thing," my father said, "and this part is crucial." He hesitated, looking at Dr. Harrison, as if gauging whether I was strong enough to hear the next part of the plan. "Jessica," he said. I stiffened at the name. "The woman who had worn my mother is Jewelry. The woman who is currently sleeping in my guest room. She needs to be there at the will reading," my father said. "If she is not there, she might slip away. She might take the money and run when she sees Derek go down. We need her in the room. We need her implicated. We need her to believe she is part of the victory so she can share in the defeat." "How do I get her there?" I asked. "Derek is trying to keep her somewhat hidden. He brings her to the house, but he introduces her as the nurse or a consultant. He won't want his mistress at the official legal proceeding with the family lawyers. It would look suspicious. You have to invite her," my father said. My stomach churned. "You want me to invite his mistress to the reading of your will?" "I want you to invite the nurse," my father corrected. "You need to tell Derek that you are overwhelmed. Tell him you are emotionally unstable. Tell him you can't face the lawyers alone. Tell him you need Jessica there for moral support because she was with me at the end. Tell him her presence brings you comfort." I almost laughed out loud at the absurdity of it. It was twisted, it was sick, and it was brilliant. "If you invite her," my father said, "Derek will think you are the most naive woman on the planet. His ego will explode. He will love the idea of having his wife and his mistress in the same room both serving him. It will make him careless. And it will ensure that when the police walk through those doors, Jessica is sitting right next to him." I closed my eyes, visualizing the scene. I saw myself asking Derek to bring her. I saw the smirk he would try to hide. "I can do it," I said, opening my eyes. "I will tell him I need her. I will tell him I am afraid I might faint without a medical professional nearby. I will make him feel like a hero for bringing her." My father reached up and cupped my face. "This is going to be the hardest acting performance of your life, Clara. You have to go back to that house and look at the man who hit you and pretend to be submissive. You have to look at the woman sleeping with your husband and pretend to be grateful. If you crack, if you show even a hint of anger, they will run. You have to be ice cold." "I am not ice," I said, thinking of the scalpel in my pocket. "I am fire, Dad. I am going to burn them down. But I will smile while I light the match." Dr. Harrison stepped forward, checking his watch. "It is almost 3:30, Clara," he said softly. "The sun will be up soon. You need to get back before Derek wakes up. If he finds your bed empty, the whole plan falls apart." I stood up, smoothing down my trench coat. I felt different, taller, stronger. When I walked into this mausoleum, I was a broken orphan. Now I was a conspirator. I was the agent of karma. I looked at my father one last time. He looked tired, the adrenaline fading, but he gave me a thumbs up, a gesture he used to do when I was a little girl dropping me off at school. "Be brave, Clara," he whispered. "Just 48 hours. I will count every second I promised." I turned and walked toward the door. The plan was set. The trap was baited. All I had to do was go home and let the rats come to the cheese. As I stepped out into the night, I replayed the script in my head. "I am sorry, Derek. I was hysterical. Please forgive me. Please help me." I practiced the tremor in my voice. I practiced the look of doe-eyed devotion. I reached my car and climbed in. The engine roared to life. I drove back toward Sterling Manor, toward the house that was no longer a home, but a stage. And as the gates of the estate loomed in the headlights, I whispered a vow to the empty passenger seat. "Enjoy your victory lap, Derek, because the finish line is a prison cell." I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. The house was dark and silent. I slipped inside, locking the door behind me. I crept up the stairs, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. I entered the master bedroom. Derek was still asleep, sprawled across the bed like a king. I took off my trench coat. I took off my boots. I slid back under the covers, my body stiff and cold. I lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for the morning, waiting for the curtain to rise, The show was about to begin, and I was going to give the performance of a lifetime. The drive back to Sterling Manor felt like a re-entry into the atmosphere. I was moving from the sanctuary of the dead back into the treacherous world of the living. The dashboard clock read 3:58 in the morning when I finally steered the Volvo through the iron gates. The house sat on the hill like a sleeping predator, its windows dark and unblinking. I killed the engine and coasted the last 50 yards to keep the noise down, letting the gravel crunch softly under the tires. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were no longer trembling. The fear that had paralyzed me yesterday had burned away, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I was an actress now. This car was my dressing room, and the sprawling mansion before me was the stage. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red and puffy, which was perfect. I didn't need makeup to look like a wreck. I looked like a woman who had lost her father and was losing her mind. That was exactly what Derek wanted to see. I slipped out of the car, leaving the scalpel locked in the glove compartment. I didn't need a blade inside the house. My weapon now was my submission. I unlocked the side door and crept into the mudroom. I stripped off my trench coat and rain boots, which were caked with the cemetery clay. I bundled them into a trash bag and hid them deep inside the utility closet behind the winter coats. I would clean them later. Right now, I had to be a ghost. I moved through the house with the muscle memory of a lifetime. The floorboards settled under my weight. I climbed the stairs, avoiding the third step, and eased open the door to the master bedroom. The air inside was stale recycled and heavy with the smell of Derek. He was still sprawled across the bed, taking up more than his share of the mattress, his arm flung out, as if reaching for something he felt entitled to. I crawled into bed beside him. My body was ice cold from the night air, but I didn't pull the covers up. I lay there on top of the sheets, shivering intentionally. I needed him to feel my coldness if he woke up. I needed him to think I had been wandering the grounds like a lost soul. I stared at his sleeping face. In the moonlight, he looked almost innocent. It was terrifying how normalcy could mask a monster. This man had poisoned my father. He had slapped my face, and now he was dreaming of spending my inheritance. I didn't sleep. I lay there counting the minutes until sunrise, watching the gray light of dawn slowly creep across the Persian rug. I rehearsed my lines. I practiced the quiver in my voice. I visualized the broken woman he expected me to be. At 7 o'clock, the alarm on his phone went off. Derek groaned and rolled over, his hand smacking the nightstand as he fumbled for the device. He silenced the noise and rubbed his face sitting up. He looked at me and blinked. I was sitting up in bed, hugging my knees, staring blankly at the wall. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with sleep. "When did you come to bed?" I didn't hear you. I didn't look at him. I kept my gaze fixed on the wallpaper pattern. "I couldn't sleep," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I went for a walk." Derek froze. He sat up straighter, the sleep vanishing from his eyes, instantly replaced by suspicion. "A walk," he repeated. "In the middle of the night." "Where did you go, Clara?" I turned my head slowly to look at him. I let my shoulders slump. I let the exhaustion radiate off me. "Just around the garden," I lied. "I went to the gazebo where Dad used to read. I just sat there. I felt like I couldn't breathe in this house, Derek. It is so big, and now it is so empty." Derek studied my face, searching for a lie, but all he saw were my red eyes and my pale skin. He saw the bruise on my cheek where he had hit me, which was now a dark, ugly purple. His eyes lingered on it for a second, but he didn't apologize. Instead, his shoulders relaxed. He bought it. "You need to stop being so dramatic," he said, swinging his legs out of bed. "Walking around in the dark is dangerous. You are not thinking clearly." "I am sorry," I said softly. "You are right. I am not thinking clearly. Everything is a blur." He stood up and stretched, scratching his chest. He looked at me with a mix of pity and annoyance. "Well, get up," he said. "We have a big day. The lawyers are coming at 9. You need to pull yourself together. I don't want you looking like a zombie in front of the partners." I nodded obediently and slid out of bed. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. Showtime, Clara. I went downstairs to the kitchen. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, was already there brewing coffee. She looked at my bruise and gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, my God, Mrs. Sterling," she whispered. "Your face. What happened?" I touched the tender spot. I walked into a door. I said loud enough for Derek to hear as he walked into the kitchen behind me. I was stumbling around in the dark. I am so clumsy. Mrs. Gable didn't look convinced, but she knew better than to ask questions in this house. She poured me a cup of black coffee and retreated to the pantry. Derek sat at the head of the island scrolling through his phone. He was wearing a navy blue suit, crisp and tailored. He looked every inch the grieving CEO. I sat on the stool next to him, wrapping my hands around the warm mug to stop them from shaking. "Derek," I said. He didn't look up from his screen. "What?" I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of weakness I could muster. "I have been thinking about what you said last night, about the business, about the estate." He stopped scrolling. He set the phone down and turned to face me, his full attention finally on me, and he asked, his voice low and controlled. "You were right," I said, staring into my coffee cup. "I am just a pediatrician. I put Band-Aids on knees. I don't know anything about mergers or tax shelters or offshore trusts. I tried to look at the papers Dad left in the study and it just gave me a headache. I feel like I am drowning, Derek." I looked up at him, tears welling in my eyes on command. "I don't want to do it. I don't want to be the CEO. I don't want the responsibility. It is too much pressure. I just want to grieve my father. I just want to be left alone." Derek stared at me. For a moment he looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe it was this easy. He had prepared for a fight. He had prepared to bully me into submission. But here I was handing him the crown on a silver platter. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. He reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm and dry. "Oh, Clara," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I told you, you are taking on too much. You are not built for this world, babe. Your dad knew that too. That is why he wanted me here, to protect you." I nodded, wiping a tear from my cheek. "I want you to handle it," I said. "All of it. The lawyers, the bank accounts, the stock transfers. I will sign whatever you want. I just want this nightmare to be over." Derek squeezed my hand tight, too tight. "You are making the right decision," he said. "It is for the best. I will take the burden off your shoulders. You just sit there and look pretty and let the men handle the business." He stood up, energized by his victory. He checked his watch. "The lawyers will be here in an hour. Why don't you go lie down on the sofa in the living room? I need to make a few calls to prepare the paperwork." "Thank you, Derek," I said meekly. "You are so good to me." He kissed the top of my head right near the hairline. It took everything I had not to shudder. "I know I am," he said, arrogance oozing from every pore. I walked out of the kitchen, dragging my feet, acting the part of the defeated widow. I went into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa, but the moment I was out of his sight, I sat up. I pulled a small compact mirror from my pocket and angled it so I could see the reflection of the hallway. Derek didn't go to his study. He walked out onto the patio, closing the glass sliding door behind him. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. He didn't pace. He stood there, legs apart, chest puffed out, looking out over the estate that he thought was now his. I couldn't hear him through the glass, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly who he was calling, and thanks to the Bluetooth connection that sometimes lingered when he was close to the house living room speakers, I could see the faint blue light on the sound bar flicker. He hadn't disconnected his phone from the house system since playing music last night. He wasn't playing music now, but if I was careful, I could turn up the volume just enough to hear the faint echo of the call through the surround sound speakers. I grabbed the remote and pressed the volume up button gently. Static. Then a voice. "Told you she would fold." It was Derek. Jessica's voice came through tinny but audible. She really agreed, just like that. She begged me to take it. Derek laughed. He sounded giddy. "She is a mess, Jessica. She is wandering around the house like a ghost. She has a bruise on her face from last night, and she told the maid she walked into a door. She is completely broken. I have never seen anything so pathetic." I sat on the sofa, my fingernails digging into the velvet cushion. "Pathetic." "Keep talking, Derek." "So what is the plan?" Jessica asked. "The lawyers are coming at 9, Derek said. She is going to sign the full power of attorney and the asset transfer. By noon, I will control the Sterling Group. By dinner time, I will have the eviction notice ready for her." I smiled a cold, humorless smile. He was moving fast, faster than even my father had predicted. "When can I come over?" Jessica asked. "I am sick of staying at this hotel. I want to see you. I want to see the house." Derek paused. I watched him through the mirror. He ran a hand through his hair. "Actually, come now," he said. "Really?" Jessica squealed. "Yes," Derek said. "Listen to me. Clara is unstable. She is crying. She is dizzy. I am going to spin it that she needs medical supervision. You are a nurse. Come over right now. Wear your scrubs. Tell everyone you are here to monitor her vitals and help her with the stress." "You want me to take care of her?" Jessica asked, sounding amused. "I want you here to make sure she doesn't faint before she signs the papers." Derek said, his voice turning hard. "Keep her upright. Keep her sedated if you have to. Just get her to that table and put a pen in her hand. Once she signs, you can drop the act. We will pop a bottle of champagne right in front of her." "I love you," baby Jessica purred. "I am on my way. I will be there in 20 minutes. See you soon, future Mrs. Sterling." Derek hung up. I quickly muted the speakers and laid back down on the sofa, closing my eyes. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with anticipation. He had done exactly what we wanted. He had invited the accomplice to the crime scene. He was bringing Jessica into the house, into the meeting, into the trap. I heard the sliding door open. Derek walked back into the living room. He walked with a bounce in his step. He hummed a little tune. He stopped by the sofa and looked down at me. "Clara," he said softly. I opened my eyes and looked up at him, blinking slowly. "I just called the agency," he lied smoothly. "I am worried about your health. You look very pale. I asked them to send over a nurse to keep an eye on you today, just to make sure your blood pressure doesn't drop during the meeting." I managed a weak, grateful smile. "That is very thoughtful of you, Derek," I said. "I do feel a bit lightheaded." "Do not worry," he said, patting my shoulder. "Help is on the way." I closed my eyes again, hiding the triumph in them. Yes, Derek help was on the way, but not the kind he thought. The nurse was coming to seal her own fate, and my father was waiting in the wings, ready to deliver the final diagnosis. I lay there listening to the clock tick, tick-tock. The mouse was in the trap. The cheese was taken. Now all we had to do was wait for the snap. I visualized Jessica driving her red Porsche toward the house. I visualized her walking through the door with her fake smile. I couldn't wait to see that smile vanish. "I am ready, Daddy," I thought, sending the message out into the universe. Let the games begin. The red Porsche 911 tore up the driveway like a fresh wound opening on the landscape. I stood by the bay window in the living room watching Jessica arrive. She did not park in the guest spots. She parked right in front of the main entrance, her tires crunching aggressively on the pristine gravel, blocking the path for anyone else. It was a statement. She was not a visitor. She was the new queen arriving to claim her castle. I checked my reflection in the glass one last time. My hair was messy, pulled back in a loose fraying bun. My face was scrubbed clean of makeup, highlighting the dark circles under my eyes and the purple bruise blooming on my cheek. I wore an old, oversized cardigan that swallowed my frame, making me look smaller, frailer. I looked exactly like what Derek wanted to see, a broken woman, a useful idiot. The front door opened without a knock. Jessica breezed in, carrying 2 large suitcases. She was wearing pink medical scrubs, but they were tailored tight to her body, and she had paired them with red-bottomed heels. It was a grotesque mockery of her profession. She dropped her bags in the foyer with a loud thud that echoed through the silent house. Derek walked out of his study, beaming. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to her, grabbing her by the waist and pulling her into a deep kiss right there in the hallway. I watched them from the doorway of the living room. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, was standing on the stairs holding a basket of laundry. She froze her eyes, widening in shock, as she watched the master of the house groping the nurse while his wife stood 10 feet away. Derek broke the kiss and turned to look at me. His face didn't hold a shred of shame. "Clara," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "Jessica is here. She is going to stay for a few days to monitor your condition. I moved her bags into the master bedroom so she can be close by in case you have a panic attack in the night." I felt a sharp spike of adrenaline. The master bedroom. My bedroom. He was moving his mistress into my bed before my father was even cold in the ground. I lowered my eyes, staring at the floor. "Thank you, Derek," I whispered, my voice trembling just enough. "That is very kind of you. I do feel safer knowing a professional is here." Jessica laughed. It was a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves like broken glass. She walked over to me, looking me up and down with open disdain. She reached out and touched the fabric of my cardigan, wrinkling her nose. "Wow, Clara," she said, "you look rough. Grief really does a number on a person, doesn't it? You have aged 10 years overnight." I kept my head down, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from snapping back. "I haven't slept," I mumbled. "Clearly," Jessica said. She turned to Derek, flipping her hair. "Babe, I am parched." The drive over was exhausting. She looked back at me, snapping her fingers. "Clara, be a dear and make me a coffee, would you? An oat milk latte, extra foam, no sugar. I have to watch my figure, unlike some people who clearly gave up years ago." Mrs. Gable dropped the laundry basket. It tumbled down the stairs, spilling towels everywhere. "Mr. Sterling," she gasped, stepping forward. "Mrs. Sterling is not a maid. I will make the coffee." Derek spun around, his eyes flashing with anger. "Pick up those towels, Mrs. Gable," he barked. "And mind your own business. Clara is happy to do it. She needs to keep busy. It is good for her mental health." "Right, Clara." He looked at me, his eyes daring me to object. I looked at Mrs. Gable, who looked ready to fight for me. I gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of my head. "Wait," my eyes said. "Trust me." "It is okay, Mrs. Gable," I said softly. "I can make the coffee. I know how Jessica likes it. She used to drink it when she was caring for Dad." I walked into the kitchen, my legs feeling heavy. I could hear them giggling in the hallway. I heard the sound of a zipper being pulled down. I turned on the espresso machine, the noise drowning out their flirting. As I frothed the oat milk, I stared at the swirling white foam. I imagined it was a storm that was about to swallow them whole. I carried the latte out to the living room on a silver tray. Derek and Jessica were sitting on the sofa, my sofa. Jessica had her legs thrown over Derek's lap. He was massaging her foot. When I walked in, they didn't move. "Here is your coffee," I said, setting the tray down on the coffee table. Jessica reached for it without looking at me. She took a sip and grimaced. "Ugh," she groaned. "It is lukewarm. And you burned the milk. God! Clara, can't you do anything right? Even making coffee is too hard for you now." "I am sorry," I stammered, clasping my hands together. My hands were shaking. "I will make another one. No bother," Derek said, waving his hand dismissively. "We have more important things to do. Sit down, Clara." He pointed to the armchair opposite them, the chair my father used to sit in when he visited. I sat down, perched on the edge like a scolded child. Derek reached into his briefcase, which was sitting on the floor. He pulled out a thick stack of documents stapled together in blue legal covers. He placed them on the table, pushing aside the coffee tray. "We need to talk about the estate," he said, his tone shifting to a serious business pitch. I looked at the papers. I saw the words "Power of Attorney" and "Stock Transfer Agreement" printed in bold letters. "I spoke with the lawyers this morning," Derek said. "It is worse than we thought, Clara. The estate tax situation is a disaster. If we don't act today, right now, the government is going to take 40% of everything. The house, the company, the investments. Your dad didn't structure things properly." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine, intense and predatory. "There is a loophole," he said, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "But we have to be fast. You need to divest your assets. If you technically own nothing, they can't tax you." I frowned, feigning confusion. "Divest?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "It means you transfer ownership to someone else," Derek explained, speaking slowly as if to a toddler. "Someone you trust. Someone who can hold the assets for you until the tax audit period is over." He tapped the stack of papers. "I am willing to do that for you, Clara. I will take on the burden. I will take on the risk. You transfer the Sterling Group shares and the real estate deeds to me. Legally, I will be the owner. But practically nothing changes. I just hold it to keep the IRS away." Jessica chimed in, taking another sip of her lukewarm latte. He is doing you a huge favor, Clara. Most husbands wouldn't want the headache. You should be grateful he is so smart. I looked at the papers, then at Derek. But transfer them for how much I asked. Derek smiled. That is the genius part. We make it a sale, a legal transaction. You sell me the entire estate. For $1. $1, I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, he said. $1. It creates a binding contract. It stops the government from seizing the assets because they have been sold. It is a standard procedure for high net worth families. It was a lie. A blatant, clumsy lie. Selling a billion-dollar company for $1 would trigger an immediate fraud investigation by the SEC and the IRS. It wasn't a tax shelter. It was theft. He was trying to steal my legacy for the price of a gumball. I hesitated, letting my eyes dart around the room nervously. I don't know, Derek, I said. Dad always said I should never sign anything without a lawyer reading it first. Derek, his face hardened. He slammed his hand down on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. Your dad is dead, Clara, he snapped, and his bad advice is the reason we are in this mess. Do you want to lose the house? Do you want to lose the money to pay for your mother's care facility? Do you want to be homeless because you were too stubborn to listen to me? He stood up, towering over me. I am trying to save you. Why are you making this so hard? I shrank back into the chair, covering my face with my hands. I am sorry, I sobbed, dry heaving slightly to sell the panic. I am just scared. I don't understand these things. That is why I am here, Derek said, softening his tone but keeping the pressure on. Trust me, Clara. Have I ever steered you wrong? I looked up at him through my fingers. I saw the greed in his eyes. It was naked and ugly. Okay, I whispered. Okay, Derek. I trust you. He relaxed instantly. He pulled a gold fountain pen from his pocket. My father is fountain pen. He uncapped it and handed it to me. Sign here, he said, flipping to the back page of the first document. And here, an initial here. I took the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. This pen had signed the deals that built skyscrapers. Now it was being used to sign them away. I bent over the table. My hand shook violently. I wasn't faking the tremor this time. My body was reacting to the magnitude of what I was doing. I was handing him the weapon he would use to kill me. But I knew that hidden in the fine print of the law, this was also the weapon that would kill him. Fraud, my father had said. Let him commit fraud. I pressed the nib to the paper. I signed my name. Clara Sterling. Good, Derek said, flipping the page. Next one. The deed to the house. $1. Sign. I signed. The offshore accounts. Sign. I signed. The patent portfolio. Sign. I signed my name 12 times. With every signature, Derek grew more excited. He was practically vibrating. Jessica was watching closely, her eyes glued to the paper, counting the billions as they transferred. When I signed the last document, Derek snatched the papers away, as if afraid I might snatch them back. He held them to his chest and let out a laugh of pure triumph. Done, he said. It is done. He looked at Jessica and winked. Then he pulled out his phone. This calls for a celebration, he said, and an announcement. The world needs to know that the Sterling legacy is in safe hands. He opened Instagram and swiped to the live camera. He held the phone up high, framing himself, Jessica, and me, in the background slumped in the chair. Derek, what are you doing? I asked, wiping my eyes. Just saying hello to the investors, he said. Smile, Clara. He pressed the button. Hey, everyone. Derek said, his voice booming with charisma. Derek Sterling here, coming to you live from Sterling Manor. I know it has been a tough 24 hours for the family with the passing of the great Thomas Sterling, but I wanted to hop on here and share some news. He turned the camera so it focused on me. I looked pathetic, pale, and small in the big chair. My beautiful, brave wife Clara has just made a monumental decision, he said. She has decided to step down from all executive duties to focus on her healing. She has officially transferred full control and ownership of the Sterling Group to me, effective immediately. He panned the camera to the stack of signed documents on the table. We just signed the papers. It is a huge responsibility, but one I am honored to take on. Clara knows that I will take this company to heights her father never dreamed of. He pulled Jessica into the frame. And we have got an amazing support team here. Jessica has been a rock for Clara. We are all pulling together." Jessica waved at the camera, flashing a bright fake smile. "Hi everyone, sending love and light." And I sat there frozen. He was live streaming his crime. He was broadcasting his fraud to thousands of viewers. He was so arrogant, so sure of his victory, that he was creating the perfect digital evidence trail for the prosecutor. Derek looked at the comments rolling in on the screen. "Thanks for the congrats, guys," he said. "Yeah, it is a new era. Hashtag new CEO. Hashtag Sterling Empire." He ended the stream and tossed the phone onto the sofa. He looked at me, his eyes cold and dismissive. "All right, Clara," he said. "You did good. Now go upstairs to the guest room. Jessica and I have a lot of work to do. We need to go over the inventory." "The guest room?" I asked. "But that is the small room in the attic. It is the only room available," Derek said, shrugging. "Jessica is in the master, and I need the study. You will be fine up there. It is quiet. You wanted to be left alone, right? So go, be alone." Jessica giggled. "Yeah, Clara, run along. We will call you if we need more coffee." I stood up, my legs feeling steady now. I looked at Derek. I looked at Jessica. I looked at the papers on the table. "Okay," I said softly. "I will go." I walked toward the stairs. I didn't look back. I climbed the flights to the third floor to the small, dusty room where the servants used to sleep. I closed the door and locked it. I sat down on the narrow bed and pulled out my phone. I opened Instagram. I went to Derek's profile. I watched the replay of the video he had just posted. I watched him gloat. I watched him lie. I watched him sign his own death warrant. I took a screenshot. Then I sent a text message to a number that wasn't saved in my contacts. "It is done. He signed. He streamed it. He is yours." A moment later, a reply came back. "See you tomorrow." I lay back on the pillow and closed my eyes. I could hear music starting to thump from the living room downstairs. They were popping champagne. They were celebrating. Let them dance, I thought. Let them dance on the edge of the volcano, because tomorrow the mountain blows. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Blackwood Tower felt like an ascent to the gallows. My stomach was twisting in knots, not from fear, but from a volatile mixture of anticipation and nausea. Beside me stood my husband Derek, looking like he had just stepped out of a GQ photo shoot. His navy suit was impeccable, his hair was gelled to perfection, and he smelled of confidence and expensive cologne. On his other side stood Jessica, wearing a white dress that was far too tight and far too bridal for a legal proceeding. She was clinging to his arm, checking her reflection in the polished brass doors of the elevator, humming a little tune that grated on my nerves. I stood in the corner, clutching my purse to my chest, wearing a black dress that hung loosely on my frame. I had spent an extra 10 minutes in the bathroom this morning, applying gray eyeshadow under my eyes to accentuate the look of exhaustion. I needed to look like the victim. I needed to look like the woman who was about to lose everything, so that when the hammer fell, the shock would be absolute. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the lobby of Vance and Hardman, the most prestigious law firm in the city. The space was a cathedral of glass and steel, screaming power and money. But today it was also screaming chaos. Derek had not been subtle. He had turned a private family matter into a media circus. The lobby was packed with reporters, photographers, and camera crews. As soon as we stepped out, the flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm, blinding me. Microphones were thrust in our faces. "Mr. Sterling, is it true you are taking over the company today? Mrs. Sterling, how are you coping with the loss of your father? Who is the woman with you, Mr. Sterling?" Derek stopped in the middle of the lobby, basking in the attention. He raised a hand, flashing a practiced, solemn smile. "Please, everyone," he said, his voice projecting effortlessly. "We are here to honor the wishes of the late Thomas Sterling. My wife is very fragile right now, so please give her some space. I will be making a full statement after the proceedings." He put a protective arm around me, squeezing my shoulder hard enough to bruise. It looked like a gesture of comfort to the cameras, but I knew it was a warning. "Play your part, Clara." He led us through the throng of reporters toward the main conference room. Jessica walked a step behind us, chin held high, soaking up the attention as if she were a movie star on a red carpet rather than a mistress at a funeral march. We entered the conference room. It was massive with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. A long mahogany table dominated the room. Seated around it were the 12 members of the board of directors of the Sterling Group. These were men and women who had worked with my father for decades. They looked somber and anxious. They knew the company was at a crossroads. At the head of the table sat Mr. Vance, my father's personal attorney and oldest friend. He was a silver-haired lion of a man with eyes that could cut glass. He saw me enter, and for a fraction of a second his eyes softened. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "The game is on." Derek pulled out a chair for me at the center of the table. "Sit here, darling," he whispered loud enough for the board members to hear. "Just relax. I will handle everything." He sat down next to me and gestured for Jessica to take the seat on his other side. A ripple of confusion went through the room. The board members exchanged glances. Why was the nurse here? Why was she sitting at the table? Mr. Vance cleared his throat, bringing the room to silence. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Thomas Sterling," he began, his voice grave and steady. "This is a solemn occasion. I expect everyone to treat it with the respect it deserves." He opened a leather folder in front of him. Derek leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs, looking bored. He tapped his fingers on the table, a rhythmic sound that echoed in the quiet room. He already knew what the will said, or at least he thought he did. He believed that whatever was in that folder was irrelevant because of the papers I had signed yesterday. He was just waiting for his moment to interrupt. Mr. Vance began to read. "I, Thomas Sterling, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. I revoke all prior wills and codicils." He paused, looking over his reading glasses at the room. "To my loyal staff and the employees of the Sterling Group, I leave a bonus pool of $10 million to be distributed according to tenure." A murmur of appreciation went around the table. Derek rolled his eyes, checking his watch. "To my charitable foundation, I leave 20% of my liquid assets to continue the work of medical research and child welfare." And finally, Mr. Vance said, his voice rising slightly, "To my only child, my beloved daughter, Clara Sterling." I felt Derek tense up beside me. This was it. I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including all real estate holdings, my personal art collection, and my controlling interest in the Sterling Group, consisting of 51% of all voting shares. I name Clara Sterling as the sole executor and the new chairwoman of the board. The room erupted in whispers. The board members looked at me, some with relief, some with skepticism. I kept my head down, staring at my hands, twisting my wedding ring. Mr. Vance looked directly at me. "Clara, your father believed in you. He believed you have the strength and the heart to lead this company into the future." This was the cue. Derek laughed. It was a loud, jarring sound that cut through the sentimentality of the moment. He stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. All eyes turned to him. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," he said, his tone condescending. "That was a very touching reading." Truly, Thomas was a great man. But unfortunately, that document is outdated. Mr. Vance narrowed his eyes. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling. This will was drafted 6 months ago. It is the most current legal document we have." Derek smiled a shark-like grin. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the blue folder containing the papers I had signed yesterday. He tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy slap, sliding across the polished wood until it stopped in front of Mr. Vance. "Not anymore," Derek said. The board members leaned in, trying to see what the document was. The reporters, who had been allowed to stand at the back of the room, raised their cameras, sensing the drama. Yesterday afternoon, Derek announced, his voice booming for the benefit of the press. "My wife, Clara, made a very brave and difficult decision. As many of you know, Clara has been struggling. The grief of losing her father, combined with her lack of business experience, has been overwhelming for her." He looked down at me, his eyes full of fake pity. "Clara knows she is not capable of running a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. She knows that Thomas's sentimental wish for her to take over would run this company into the ground within a month. She loves this company too much to let that happen." He pointed to the folder. So yesterday, Clara voluntarily transferred all her assets, all her shares, and all her executive powers to me. Gasps filled the room. Mr. Vance picked up the folder. He opened it and scanned the pages. His face remained impassive, but I saw his jaw tighten. He looked at me. "Clara," Mr. Vance asked, "is this your signature?" I looked up, my eyes wide and watery. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I whispered. "Did you sign this of your own free will?" Mr. Vance asked the standard legal question. Derek answered for me. "Of course she did. I was there. Jessica was there. We all saw it. Clara wants to retire. She wants to live a quiet life away from the pressure. She sold the estate to me to simplify the tax burden and ensure the stability of the company." He looked around the room, addressing the board members. "Ladies and gentlemen, as of this moment, I am the majority shareholder and the new chairman of the Sterling Group. The king is dead. Long live the king." He spread his arms wide, claiming the room, claiming the company, claiming the world. There was a moment of stunned silence. The board members looked horrified. They knew Derek. They knew his reputation as a ruthless venture capitalist who stripped companies for parts. They looked at me pleadingly, hoping I would speak up, hoping I would say it was a lie. But I stayed silent. I shrank into my chair, letting my shoulders hunch. Derek turned to Mr. Vance. "So you can shred that old will, Vance. It is worthless paper. The company is mine. The house is mine. Everything is mine." He looked down at me, and his expression changed. The fake pity vanished, replaced by cold, hard disdain. "And now that we have settled the business matters, there is a personal matter I need to address." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Clara, stand up," he said. I looked at him confused. "Derek." "Stand up," he barked. I stood up, my legs shaking. The cameras were zooming in on my face, capturing every twitch of emotion. Derek held up the paper. "This is an eviction notice," he said. The room went deadly silent. Even the photographer stopped clicking for a second. What I breathed. "You heard me," Derek said, his voice icy. "Since I am now the sole owner of Sterling Manor, I am exercising my right to choose who lives there. And frankly, Clara, I don't want you there. You are depressing. You are a reminder of the past. And this company, this family needs to look to the future." He took a step toward me, invading my personal space. "I want you out by tonight. You can take your clothes and your little medical bag. Leave the jewelry. Leave the car. Those are company assets now." "Derek, please," I sobbed, playing the part to the hilt. "Where will I go? That is my home." "Not anymore," he said. "It is my home, and I am choosing to share it with someone who actually appreciates me, someone who supports me, someone who is not a weak, pathetic burden." He reached out and grabbed Jessica's hand, pulling her to her feet. She stood next to him, beaming, radiating triumph. "Everyone," Derek said, addressing the cameras, "I would like to introduce you to the future Mrs. Sterling. Jessica has been my rock. She is the woman who will stand by my side as we build this empire." The flashbulbs erupted again, capturing the image of Derek holding hands with his mistress, while his wife stood there in tears. It was the ultimate betrayal broadcast live to the world. I looked at Jessica. She was glowing. She looked at the reporters, posing for the angles she liked best. Then she turned to look at me. Her eyes were cruel. She had won. She had the man, she had the money, she had the house. And she wanted to twist the knife one last time. She stepped closer to me. The room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. "You should have seen this coming," Clara Jessica said, her voice dripping with venom. "You were never enough for him. You were just a stepping stone, a boring, frumpy stepping stone." She laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. "Look at you. You are pathetic, standing there crying like a little girl. Do yourself a favor and leave before you embarrass yourself even more." I looked at her. I looked at Derek, who was watching with a smirk on his face. He was enjoying this. He wanted to see me broken. He wanted to see me crawl. I trusted you," I whispered. "I trusted both of you." "That was your mistake," Jessica sneered. And then she did it. She raised her hand. It was a fast, sharp motion. Smack. Her palm connected with my cheek, the same cheek Derek had bruised the night before. The sound echoed through the conference room like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. The sting was immediate and hot. Tears sprang to my eyes. Gasps filled the room. A reporter shouted, "Hey, that is assault!" Mr. Vance stood up, knocking his chair over. But Jessica didn't care. She leaned in close to my ear, her voice a hiss that only I could hear clearly, but the microphones picked up the malice. "Get out," she spat. "Get out, you leech! You are done." I stood there, my hand cupping my burning cheek. I looked at the floor. I let the silence stretch. I let the image sink in. The grieving widow slapped by the mistress. The daughter of the founder evicted from her own company. It was the lowest point of my life, but deep inside, buried under the layers of fake grief and real pain, a small flame was burning. It was the flame of victory, because they had done it. They had crossed the line. Derek had confessed to the transfer. He had declared ownership. He had evicted me and Jessica. Jessica had assaulted me in front of 50 witnesses. They had walked right off the cliff. I slowly lifted my head. I didn't look at Jessica. I didn't look at Derek. I looked at the camera lens directly across the room. I looked into the eyes of the world. And then I looked at the double doors at the back of the conference room. I took a deep breath. "Is that all I asked?" My voice quiet but steady. Derek laughed. "Is that all?" "Clara, I just took your life." "Yes, that is all. Now get out." I wiped the tear from my cheek. I straightened my spine. I dropped the hunch. I dropped the fear. "I don't think so, Derek," I said. Derek frowned, confused by the sudden change in my tone. "What did you say?" "I said I don't think so." I repeated, my voice gaining strength, filling the room. "You think you took my life. You think you took my company. But you forgot one thing, Derek." I turned to face him fully, letting him see the fire in my eyes for the first time. "You forgot that a contract requires 2 living parties to be valid, and you forgot that you can't inherit from a man." I paused, letting the tension build to a breaking point. "Who isn't dead?" Derek's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "You are crazy. Get her out of here, security." But the security guards didn't move. They were looking at the doors. I pointed to the back of the room. "I think you should look behind you, Derek," I said. The heavy double doors began to open. A hush fell over the room. A silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the building. The doors swung wide, and the sound of an electric wheelchair humming against the carpet filled the void. The stinging sensation on my left cheek was rapidly turning into a throbbing heat, but strangely, it was the only thing that felt warm in that freezing conference room. The silence that followed Jessica's slap was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the lungs of every person present. The reporters had lowered their cameras. The board members were frozen with their mouths slightly open. Even Derek looked momentarily stunned by the ferocity of his mistress's public assault. Jessica stood there, chest heaving, hands still raised, slightly trembling from the impact. Her eyes were wild with a mix of adrenaline and hatred. She expected me to crumble. She expected the weak, broken Clara to dissolve into a puddle of tears and run out of the room just as she had commanded. She waited for the sob. She waited for the retreat. But I did not cry. I slowly raised my hand and touched my burning cheek. I felt the skin tender and hot under my fingertips. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of expensive leather polish and the stale coffee on the table. And then I did something that terrified them. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was not a nervous smile. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was sharp, cold, and predatory. It was the smile of a woman who had just watched her enemies walk voluntarily into a cage and lock the door behind them. Derek saw it first. His smirk faltered. He took a half step back, his brow furrowing in confusion. He had lived with me for 5 years, and he had never seen this expression on my face. He looked at me like he was looking at a stranger. "Clara," he said, his voice losing a fraction of its arrogance. "Why are you smiling? You just lost everything. Did you not hear us? Get out." I lowered my hand from my cheek. I squared my shoulders, standing tall in my black dress. I looked at Jessica, who was starting to look uneasy. Then I turned my gaze to Derek, locking eyes with him. "I heard you, Derek," I said, my voice calm, clear, and carrying to the back of the room without a microphone. I heard every word. You said you are the owner. You said you have the papers. You said you are the king. I took a slow step toward him. He didn't move, but I saw his throat bob as he swallowed. But there is a problem with your paperwork, Derek, I continued, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that the microphone strained to pick up. You see, you based your entire hostile takeover on a transfer of assets. You forced me to sign over my inheritance, and you were so eager, so greedy that you forgot the most basic rule of property law. Derek let out a nervous laugh. Spare me the legal lecture, Clara. The papers are signed. It is done. Is it? I asked, tilting my head. A transfer of ownership is only valid if the person signing the transfer actually owns the property. You made me sign over the house. You made me sign over the company. But Derek, those things never belonged to me. Derek rolled his eyes. Oh, stop it. You are the sole heir. Your father is dead. That makes you the owner. I shook my head slowly, enjoying the confusion spreading across his face. That is just it, Derek, I said. I am the heir. But inheritance only triggers upon death. And the owner of the Sterling Group... I paused, letting the words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. The owner is not dead. Jessica let out a scoff. Oh my God, she has lost her mind. She is hallucinating. Derek, call security. She is in denial. Derek looked at the security guards by the door. Get her out of here, he barked. She is making a scene. But the guards did not move. They were staring past Derek. They were staring at the double mahogany doors at the far end of the conference room. I pointed a shaking finger at the doors. You forgot to check the pulse, Derek, I said, soft and lethal. You forgot to make sure the heart had actually stopped. You were so busy celebrating that you didn't notice the show wasn't over. Derek turned around slowly, following my gaze. At that moment, the heavy doors began to move. They didn't fly open. They opened slowly, majestically, revealing the darkness of the hallway beyond. A sound drifted into the room. It was a low, rhythmic hum, whir, whir, whir. It was the sound of an electric motor. And then from the shadows, a figure emerged. He was sitting in a high-tech motorized wheelchair, his legs covered by a wool blanket. He looked thinner than people remembered. His skin was pale and his hair was snow-white. But his posture was upright. His chin was lifted, and his eyes, those piercing steel-gray eyes that had terrified competitors for 40 years, were blazing with life. Thomas Sterling rolled into the boardroom. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. A female reporter in the front row screamed. It wasn't a question, it was a scream of genuine terror. Someone dropped a glass of water, and it shattered loudly on the floor. The board members jumped to their feet, knocking over their chairs. Mr. Vance, the lawyer, sat back in his seat with a satisfied smirk, crossing his arms over his chest. Derek did not scream. He did not move. He stood frozen, like a statue carved from ice. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickly gray color. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked at the man he had poisoned, the man he had buried, the man whose death he had toasted to just 24 hours ago. Thomas Sterling stopped his wheelchair at the head of the table. He looked around the room, silencing the chaos, with a single raised hand. Then his gaze landed on Derek. "Hello, Derek," my father said. His voice was raspy, amplified by the silence of the room. "I hear you have been trying to sell my house for $1. I have to say, I am a little insulted by the valuation." Derek, his knees gave out. He didn't sit, he collapsed. He fell backward into his leather chair, his legs unable to support his weight. He gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. He was hyperventilating, gasping for air as if the room had suddenly run out of oxygen. "No," he wheezed. "No. Impossible. I saw you. I saw the casket. You are dead. You are dead." Jessica was not as quiet. She began to back away, shaking her head violently. Her hands clawed at her own throat. "It is a ghost!" she shrieked, her voice piercing and hysterical. "It is a demon! Stay away from me! I didn't do it! Derek made me do it!" My father ignored her. He pressed a button on his armrest, propelling himself closer to Derek. "I am not a ghost, Jessica," my father said calmly. "And I am certainly not dead, though God knows you two tried your hardest to make it so." He was not alone. From the hallway behind him, more figures emerged. First came Dr. Harrison, looking solemn and vindicated. Then came the sheriff of the county, his hand resting on his holster. And behind him, 2 men and a woman in dark blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. The letters read, FBI. The sight of the federal agents broke Derek's paralysis. He scrambled to push his chair back, trying to put distance between himself and the resurrected patriarch. "This is a trick," Derek stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. This is a body double. It is a deepfake. Thomas Sterling died of heart failure. I have the certificate." The sheriff stepped forward. "The certificate was part of a sting operation." "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice booming, "one authorized by the district attorney is office." Derek looked at me, his eyes pleading, wild and desperate. "Clara," he begged. "Clara, tell them. Tell them I loved him. Tell them I took care of him. You know I did. You were there." I looked down at him, the man I had married, the man I had shared a bed with. He looked small now, pathetic, a rat cornered in a trap of his own making. I walked over to my father and placed a hand on his shoulder. I felt the warmth of his body, the solid reality of his existence. "I was there, Derek," I said, my voice devoid of pity. "I was there when you left the funeral to meet Jessica. I was there when you toasted to his death at Le Jardin. I was there last night when you hit me because I wouldn't give you the key to an empty safe." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I held it up. "And I was listening this morning when you told Jessica to drug me so I would sign the papers." Jessica let out a wail and tried to run toward the side exit. But the female FBI agent was faster. She stepped in front of the door, blocking the path. Jessica froze, looking around for an escape route that didn't exist. She looked at Derek. "You said he was dead!" She screamed at him, lunging at Derek and pounding her fists on his chest. "You said the poison worked. You said we were safe, you idiot. You lied to me." The reporters were in a frenzy now. Flashbulbs were exploding like fireworks, capturing the mistress attacking the husband, while the dead father watched. It was the scandal of the century, and it was happening live. My father looked at the FBI agents and nodded. "I think we have heard enough," he said. The agents moved in. They didn't run. They walked with the heavy, inevitable steps of justice. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting open cut through the noise. Derek sat in his chair staring at the table, unable to process the total collapse of his reality. He looked at the stack of papers, the transfer documents he had forced me to sign. They were worthless now. Just scrap paper. Evidence of a crime that had failed in the most spectacular way possible. He looked up at me one last time. His eyes were wet. "Clara," he whispered. "Why?" I leaned down close enough that only he could hear me. I gave him the answer he deserved. "Because you forgot who I was, Derek. You thought I was just a wife. You forgot I am a Sterling, and Sterlings don't get buried. We do the burying." The FBI agent grabbed Derek by the shoulder and hauled him to his feet. "Derek Sterling, you are under arrest for attempted murder conspiracy to commit murder wire fraud and elder abuse." As they twisted his arms behind his back, Derek let out a sob that sounded like a dying animal. Jessica was already in cuffs, weeping loudly and shouting that she was just a nurse, that she was innocent. I stood next to my father, watching them be dragged out of the room. The flashbulbs blinded them. The questions from the press assaulted them. They were being paraded in their shame, just as they had paraded their arrogance moments before. My father reached up and took my hand. "Are you okay, Clara?" he asked quietly. I looked at the empty chair where Derek had sat. I touched my cheek where the bruise was starting to darken. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in months the air felt clean. "Yes, Daddy," I said. "I am okay." I looked at the camera crew that was now pointing their lenses at me, waiting for a statement. I didn't hide. I didn't look down. I looked straight into the lens. "I am better than okay," I thought. "I am free." The chaos in the boardroom was suffocating, but my father cut through it with a single wave of his hand. He pressed a button on the console built into the armrest of his wheelchair. Immediately, the motorized blackout shades on the floor-to-ceiling windows began to descend, plunging the room into a dim twilight. The massive presentation screen at the head of the table flickered to life. "You claimed you loved me, Derek," my father said, his voice echoing in the sudden darkness. "You told the press you were a grieving son. You told my daughter you were her protector. But I think it is time we watch the behind-the-scenes footage of your performance." The screen illuminated, painting the faces of the shocked board members in a harsh blue light. It was a video file, date stamped 2 weeks ago. The angle was high and wide, clearly filmed from a hidden camera inside the library of Sterling Manor. On the screen, Derek was sitting at my father's desk drinking a scotch. Jessica walked in wearing her nurse uniform, but she wasn't carrying medicine. She was carrying a small vial. She sat on Derek's lap, giggling. "Is it done?" Derek asked in the video. Jessica nodded, kissing his neck. "I put the full dose in his herbal tea. Thallium takes time, babe, but it is working." He could barely hold the cup today. He was shaking so much he spilled half of it. "Good," Derek said on screen. The video quality was crystal clear, capturing every micro-expression of cruelty. "The faster the old man kicks the bucket, the sooner I can get Clara to sign over the rights. I am sick of playing the dutiful husband. She is so boring, Jessica. She is like a lost puppy following me around." The real Derek, sitting in the chair flanked by FBI agents, let out a strangled noise. He tried to look away from the screen, but the agent held his head forward, forcing him to watch his own villainy. The video cut to another clip. This one was dated 3 days ago. It showed Derek and Jessica in the kitchen. "What if the doctors find out?" Jessica asked, looking worried. "They won't." Derek sneered. "Harrison is an idiot. He thinks it is heart failure. Once the old man is dead, I will have him cremated immediately. No autopsy, no evidence, just a pile of ash and $1 billion in the bank." A collective gasp went through the boardroom. The shareholders looked physically ill. The reporters were recording the screen with their phones, capturing the undeniable proof of a conspiracy so dark it made the front-page news seem tame. My father paused the video on a freeze frame of Derek laughing, a laugh that looked demonic in the stillness of the room. "That is enough," my father said. The lights came back on. The room felt different now. The atmosphere had shifted from shock to judgment. There was no ambiguity left, no room for defense lawyers to spin a narrative. We had just watched them plan a murder. The lead FBI agent stepped forward. He was a tall man with a face carved from granite. He pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The metal glinted under the fluorescent lights. "Derek Sterling," the agent announced, his voice booming like a gavel strike. "You are under arrest." Derek shrank back into his chair, his hands trembling uncontrollably. No, wait. That video is deepfake. It is AI generated. You can't use that." The agent ignored him. He grabbed Derek's wrist and twisted it behind his back. Click. The sound of the first cuff locking into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut on 5 years of lies. "You are charged with attempted murder in the first degree." The agent continued reciting the list of sins like a grocery list: conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated assault, wire fraud, securities fraud, and forgery of legal documents. Jessica, who had been backed into a corner by the other agents, began to scream as they cuffed her. "I was just following orders," she wailed, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "He made me do it. He said he would pay off my student loans. I am a victim here." The female agent tightened the cuffs on Jessica's wrists. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Derek was hauled to his feet. He looked small. The expensive suit that had been his armor now looked like a costume he didn't know how to wear. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He looked around the room, searching for an ally. He looked at the board members, but they turned their backs on him in disgust. He looked at Mr. Vance, who was busy shredding the transfer documents Derek had brought. Finally, his desperate gaze landed on me. I was standing next to my father, my hand resting on his shoulder. I looked calm. I looked strong. I looked like the CEO he had tried to destroy. Derek lurched toward me, dragging the FBI agent a few steps with him. "Clara," he cried, his voice cracking. "Clara, please. Look at me. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had vowed to love for better or worse. Baby, listen to me. Derek pleaded, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. I was weak. I was stupid. But it was her. It was all her. He jerked his head toward Jessica, who was being led out of the room. She seduced me, Clara. She twisted my mind. She told me if I didn't help her, she would hurt you. I did it to protect you, Clara. I swear to God, I was trapped. I watched him lie. Even now, with the handcuffs on his wrists and the video evidence on the screen, he was still trying to manipulate me. He still thought I was the naive girl who would believe anything to save her marriage. I love you, Clara, he sobbed, dropping to his knees, the agent struggling to hold him up. You are the love of my life. Don't let them take me. We can fix this. I will testify against her. We can start over. Please, baby. Tell them it is a mistake. The room fell silent, waiting for my reaction. Would the weak wife crumble? Would she forgive him? I walked toward him. The click of my heels on the hardwood floor was steady and rhythmic. I stopped just inches out of his reach. I looked down at him kneeling before me. I studied his face. I looked for a shred of the man I thought I married. But all I saw was a stranger, a greedy, cowardly stranger. I leaned in close, my voice sharp enough to draw blood. You love me, I repeated flatly. Yes, Derek choked out, nodding frantically, hope lighting up his eyes. Yes, more than anything. I let out a short, cold laugh. You don't love me, Derek. You love my money. You love my house. You love the idea of owning me, but you never loved me because you don't destroy the things you love. I straightened up, looking down at him with pure disdain. And as for fixing this, I said, my voice dropping to a register of absolute finality, there is nothing to fix. You broke it all. You broke my trust. You broke my heart. And you tried to break my father. Derek, his face crumbled. Clara, please. Don't worry, Derek, I said, cutting him off. I won't leave you hanging. I have one last thing for you. His eyes widened. What? My divorce lawyer, I said. He gaped at me. He will be meeting you at the federal penitentiary tomorrow morning. I continued, my tone as cold as the grave he tried to put my father in. Bring a pen, although I doubt they will let you have one in solitary confinement. I took a step back, signaling the agents to take him away. You came into my life with nothing, Derek. You were a junior analyst with a cheap suit and big dreams. And that is exactly how you are leaving. I leaned in for the final kill shot, 2 empty hands and a prison sentence. Goodbye, Derek. The agents hauled him up. He screamed my name one last time, a guttural howl of regret and rage as they dragged him backward through the double doors. The press chased after him, cameras flashing, immortalizing his downfall. I watched him disappear into the hallway. The door swung shut with a heavy thud. The room was quiet again. I turned back to the table. My father looked up at me, pride shining in his eyes. I smoothed my dress and looked at the board of directors who were staring at me with a newfound respect. Now I said, taking my seat at the head of the table, I believe we have a company to run. Shall we begin? It has been 6 months since the doors of the conference room closed on Derek and Jessica, and the silence that followed has been the most peaceful time of my life. Justice moved swiftly for them. With the video evidence and my father's testimony, the trial was less of a legal battle and more of a public execution of their characters. Derek tried to plea bargain. He tried to sell out Jessica, but the district attorney was not interested in deals. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for elder abuse, sentenced Derek to 20 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. I heard through the grapevine that he is having a hard time adjusting. The other inmates do not take kindly to men who poison their own fathers-in-law. The shark of Wall Street is now just a minnow in a tank full of piranhas. Jessica fared no better. She was stripped of her nursing license permanently, ensuring she will never harm a patient again. She received a 15-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder. The last time I saw her was at the sentencing hearing. She looked at me expecting pity, but she found none. She was led away in handcuffs, leaving behind her red Porsche and her dreams of wealth to rot in a concrete cell. As for me, life has changed. I am no longer just a pediatrician. I am the chairwoman and CEO of the Sterling Group. The boardroom that once terrified me is now my domain. I learned that I have a knack for business after all. It turns out that the same instincts required to diagnose a sick child are useful for diagnosing a sick company. I cut the dead weight, I reorganized the assets, and the stock price is higher than it ever was, under Derek's tenure. But the best part is not the power or the money. It is the mornings. I still live in Sterling Manor, but it is no longer empty. My father is fully recovered. The doctors say it is a miracle, but I know it is just pure stubbornness. He comes to the office with me 3 days a week, acting as my senior advisor. We launched the Thomas Sterling Foundation last month, a charity dedicated to helping victims of domestic financial abuse. It is our way of turning our nightmare into someone else's hope. I often think back to that night in the cemetery. I think about the fear I felt and the choice I made to fight back. They thought my kindness was weakness. They looked at my silence and saw submission. They looked at my tears and saw defeat. But they forgot the most important rule of nature. I am the daughter of a lion. You can push a woman into a corner, you can threaten her world, and you can break her heart. But do not ever make the mistake of waking the predator inside a woman who is protecting her family, because when she wakes up, she does not just bite, she devours. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that no matter how dark it gets, the truth always has a way of coming into the light. Do you believe in karma? If you enjoyed watching my husband get exactly what he deserved, please hit the like button and share this video with your friends. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel. I have a feeling there are many more stories of justice waiting to be told, and you will not want to miss them. Until next time, stay strong and never let anyone mistake your kindness for weakness.